All right, people, what is going on? It is another episode of Unfiltered. This one officially go down as episode 272 in your scorecards. You can jump on board as always, 24/7, 365. It is easy to get on board the Unfiltered Revolution, Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts. Artist formerly known as Twitter, X, if you will, at Casey Stern. Jump up to the bio, and you'll see the YouTube channel where you could like, subscribe, tell all your friends. All the content into now 272 episodes deep, is always represented by BetOnline, your number one source for your sports betting needs, lines, and matchup reports for all the different sports. They're the fastest and easiest way to play all of your games, but head over to the website and use your mobile device and do it now to get in on this action, because if you use the promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, you'll get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. It is BetOnline where the game starts as I get started here. And we're going to go through some of the Ohtani statement. We're going to go through a list of questions that I have that I think are fair to ask, that I do not know the answer to, nor do you, but I would love to know your thoughts and comments on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, and everyone will have this. And those of you listening, Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts along the way. But I want to backtrack and first go and get a couple of things off my chest as we go back to the beginning of this story. And I want to say this again, and I've said this before. I have no idea what happened. I think it is ridiculous to sit there and say, oh, Ohtani's a cheater and he gambled and they should sell him up the river and all that, because that's dumb. That's dumb. I think it would also be equally ridiculous to say, well, it's obvious, quote unquote, that Shohei Ohtani didn't do anything wrong, didn't cover for his friend, didn't gamble, didn't whatever, because we have no idea. That's number one. Number two, I don't think he gambled. When I looked at, and if you go back to a previous pod I've done on this, and I've posted this video, and you go through all the facts of that first 48 hours, if you will, and I feel like, not to show 48 hours, but like we're watching Dateline breaking this down, to be fair. But if you go back to that first 48 hours, with all the changing stories and all the reports on ESPN, it seemed as if, and my honest common sense thought was, doesn't mean it's right, was that Shohei Ohtani had covered for his friend. This is his closest confidant in the States, not just a translator, but a friend who clearly, it seemed like, although not if he stole from him clearly, but it seemed as if respected the hell out of Ohtani and practically worshipped him based on some of what you hear and the comments that came out. So there's a close relationship there. He backed up his buddy. Clearly, his guy doesn't have $4.5 million. He covered for him, then realized, oops, once his reps got involved, that there was legal ramifications of it, even though he didn't bet. Then you got to backtrack. You got to separate yourself. You got to lay the guy out, sell him up the river, if you will, and leave him on the raft and to drown like DiCaprio in Titanic while you ride off into the sunset. And that doesn't mean you gambled. It doesn't mean you cheated. It just means you thought you were being nice and you didn't realize the ramifications of it. That's how it seemed to me, with the way this story was playing out, that he had, as it seemed like both sides had told the ESPN reports, if you go through the first 48 hours of this, it seemed to be Ohtani had not wanted to give his buddy $4.5 million because maybe he'd gamble it away. He had told him he had a gambling addiction. This is what we'd heard. And then he went ahead and he paid the debt for him. That's why his name's on the bookie, but he didn't do the betting. And then all of a sudden, the reps got involved. They realized what it all meant. And, hook, line, and sinker, the two sides separate. Now you've got massive theft. Now I'm a victim. That's the way it seemed. Doesn't mean it's right. I don't want Ohtani to have done anything wrong, because I love Ohtani, what it is for the game and sports and all of that. And while the league tried to throw their statement into oncoming rush hour traffic on a Friday, I give Shohei Ohtani credit for the statement he made as we transition into this here. I give him credit for the depth, and I give him credit for the length, because I thought we were reading a legalese statement that was going to be read through a translator from a lawyer that basically said, hey, look, I didn't do anything. I can't tell you anything that happened. I can't tell you any of the particulars, but my name will be cleared, and I need to concentrate on baseball. Let the investigators do their job, and in the meantime, go Dodgers. I mean, that's kind of where we all thought this was going to be. That's what I expected from this statement. So I give a lot of credit to the depth of it. Again, Major League Baseball, let's wait till Friday at 6 o'clock. What else is new? MLB praying, please, God, let this not happen. And please, let's pretend nothing happened, like everything else that Major League Baseball has zero accountability for. And here's Ohtani, to me, being way more accountable, at least from a detailed standpoint, than I thought he was going to be allowed to be legally. And at least he was. And let's not forget, just to backtrack for 1 second, that between the 48 hours of all the stories and then the victim of the theft, and then what we got here, we found out that Ippei basically lied on his resume, didn't go to school wherever he said, and who knows what. I mean, is his name even Ippei Mizuhara? We got no idea. So clearly his credibility seems to be shot by the day. I'm not saying it's not. And a lot of people with gambling addictions then lie and deceive often. I'm not saying I don't understand that as well. But I have several questions that you cannot answer really easily or properly without having doubt in what Ohtani is saying. I have several questions that you cannot answer or give me answers to, and I don't know them either, that are common sense questions that make you wonder if Ohtani is telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help him God, so to speak. But let's get into some of the comments, and I want to get your reaction in the comments and give you kind of mine and how I saw this, okay? He says here, I'm saddened and shocked that someone I trusted would have done this. Ippei has been stealing money, quote, from my account and been telling lies. I never bet on sports or have willfully sent money to the bookmaker. I stop here for question number 1. How does this man, Ippei Mizuhara, even though he's the translator, how does he have access to Ohtani's bank account? Was he paying his bills? Now, I have people to say to me, well, very possible. A lot of athletes give financial advisors their bank information. Sure. Loved ones, maybe their spouses, maybe their children, maybe their parents. I don't know. Does he give it to a friend and translator? I don't know. You tell me. I don't know the answer to it, but I ask you a pretty interesting question. How the hell does he have the information to access this bank account to basically just wills and thrills throw out $4.5 million? Which, by the way, would be nice to have to just toss out in a bank account. Sit with that question for a minute. I never bet on baseball or any other sports. I've never asked somebody to do it on my behalf. I've never gone through a bookmaker to bet on sports. And I was never asked to assist betting payment for anyone else. So basically saying, hey, look, all these reports that I lent him the money are not true. My name's on the bookmaking, but it was because he was using my account and stole from me without my knowledge. And then he goes on to talk about the fact that, and we had heard this when he first had, and I don't want to say became a victim, I'm not trying to sound condescending, but in the story, when it first became that he was the victim, we had heard about the fact that he didn't know anything until after the first game in Korea when they had the meeting. And he says as such here. He says that the media had reached out to his reps in his camp. Ippei told the reps that Shohei had paid off the debt. Ippei, quote, didn't tell me about the media inquiry, end quote. My question, why didn't the reps tell him? Now, I understand that the translator is the translator, and Ohtani doesn't speak English or much English or whatever level of English it is. But you're meaning to tell me that the only way that these reps, for a man who's making $700 million, all of his team, the only one who can communicate with him is Ippei. The only one who, in English, or in their language and then translate to English, the only person who then communicate and be a conduit to this entirety of this team is this translator. There's no communication whatsoever, mind you, between anyone in his camp, it's not Ippei's camp, and Ohtani. Zero. Because in the entirety of that 48 hours of the ESPN conversations of Ippei saying, hey, look, this is what happened, there were conversations, go back to the reports, where ESPN reporters are talking to Ippei's reps. Shohei's reps. So when Shohei's reps are saying, yeah, well, they had told ESPN that he had paid off the debt for a friend, I don't understand. Ippei told him, oh, yeah, he paid it off for me, and they just recited it to ESPN? How dumb does that sound? Does that sound like it holds water to you? Because it does not sound like it holds water to me. I said this on Twitter, and I'll say this to you, wherever you're listening or watching. If Shohei Ohtani is telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth, every single solitary member of his team should be fired. All of them should be fired. Man making that kind of money at that kind of level with this kind of legacy in this sport, in this year of this world that we're living in, doesn't have anyone that in any of that time got to Ohtani during any of that time, and media, that the only way they were communicating with him about any of this was through Ippei. They just bought the story from Ippei. Everything was fine. And then Shohei had to raise the eyebrow after the meeting a couple days later and be like, holy shit, pardon my French, what the hell is happening here? Wait a minute. You didn't tell me this. And then he explains, as he talks about in the press conference, that they met in a hotel afterwards. And Ippei had said, hey, after this meeting, after we talked to the team, let's talk in a hotel. And then for the first time told him he's a gambling addict. Now, these guys are friends, okay? That's his closest confidant, or one of them in the States, right? That's what we're supposed to believe, or what we knew. Can't believe that, somebody he trusted. He didn't trust many people. If you're trusting the man with your bank account, he's a pretty close friend, mind you. So you didn't realize this entire time that he was in debt? You didn't realize the whole time he had a gambling addiction. Gambling addictions are hard to hide, people. They are hard to hide. These are questions you need to ask yourself. I'm not sitting here trying to lay this out and tell you that I think Ohtani gambled. Let's go back to it. I'm not trying to lay out for you that I think he cheated. I'm not saying he bet on baseball. I'm not saying they should hang him up and throw his cleats away and take his money back. And no. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just asking you questions that you need to be asking, and that certainly the investigators are going to ask. But we've already got some pretty good ones already in this 12 minutes. Because how do all those handlers who should be fired, fired now, if this, if I was Ohtani, if you put yourself in the mind of a man who was just telling the truth, losing your freaking mind after all of this, right? They should all be fired. But how's there no communication back to Ohtani until that meeting? How? And how could they be that close and he trusts him to have his bank account information, but doesn't know he's a gambling problem or tremendous debt until that moment? These are things that are hard to understand. I'm not saying they mean X or Y, and that's not a cop-out. I would tell you, no problem of pining. I have no idea. But I'm just telling you, these are questions. There are some other ones that are pretty good questions. How in the world can you rack up a debt of $4.5 million with a bookie when you have no money? Now, look, I root for a team over my shoulder. John Spano, a guy who had like $10 in his bank account, tried to buy the Islanders and lied, and there's a 30 for 30 you can go watch, and basically had hoodwinked the whole world that he owned the team, and he had like $12 in his bank account. So maybe I shouldn't be asking this question. But outside of John Spano, what bookie is leaving a rope and leaving a book of debt out there of $4.5 million to a guy who's got $4? It doesn't happen. Now, you said, well, he was doing it because it was Ohtani's bank account. So he thought it was Ohtani. He thought it was coming from Ohtani. So the bookie never asked. There was nothing Ohtani had to sign. There was nothing he had to know. Again, no idea. But these are questions. How could you rack up $4.5 million in debt and have no money? How can Ohtani not notice several times $500,000 outputs being taken out of his account? Now, you say he's loaded. He got tons of money. For us, we might know $15, $150. Depending upon how rich you are, $1,500 gets taken away. Well, geez, what happened? I didn't order this on Amazon Prime, right? But $500,000? You might notice that. I don't care how much money you have. I know a lot of really rich people. I've worked with a lot of really rich athletes. I guarantee you, they'd notice if 500 grand was taken out of their account over and over and over and over again. Because even if this man had access to Ohtani's account, so did Shohei Ohtani. Now, I don't know what it says at the ATM when he takes $20 out, but I guarantee you at some point, you would notice, or at least you would think you would notice. Do I know what that means? Can I tell you it means X or Y? I can't. Can I tell you it's a question that needs answering? It's a question I'd like to understand the answer to. It doesn't seem to make it much sense to me. How you not notice that is leaving your account? There are multiple questions that will be asked by the investigators, and this will be done federally. This is going to take a long time. But it is hard to trust any of this. I want to sit there and tell you, well, because he did. I mean, through translation, seem like he was bringing a lot of detail, seemed like he wanted people to understand the truth. But at the same time, I go back to the beginning of this conversation. What if it was, as ESPN was hearing for 2 days, that a buddy had a $4.5 million gambling debt, and a guy who seems like a really great guy paid it off? And then, because he didn't gamble, he was just paying off his debt. He didn't bet on baseball. He didn't place any bets. He was just paying the debt. Then all of a sudden he realized the amount of trouble he could be in because it's illegal. And then it's either you or it's him. What if that's why Mizuhara had changed his story to protect Ohtani, and the next day come out when Ohtani's people came to him and said, you could get him out, lose his career, everything gone. So not take the fall for somebody else. We got to take the fall for yourself and leave out that part. And then Ohtani, what, a day later, had said, no, I was lying, and Ohtani didn't know anything about the debts. And, he didn't know that he was paying this off. I took the money from him. I don't know that happened. I don't know what happened. But I know that there are a hell of a lot of questions that do not seem to hold water or make any sense, even after Ohtani's statement. And we're not going to find out the answers until this investigation is over. So what kind of a cloud hangs over Major League Baseball and the Dodgers now? Well, MLB, clearly, they still don't know how the balls changed a few years ago or why the lettering is this big. And you got to read it in the eye doctor's office on the 5th line to just find out what's on the back of a jersey, because they screwed that up too and don't want to be accountable for that either. Or see-through pants, or we could list on a million things. But for the league and for the fans, we are now back in a place where we've been with our stars many times, although most of the time for PEDs, where we don't know what to trust. Now, this time, it's not the stats, and this time, it's not the validity of his greatness on the field, but this time, is he a great person and as sincere as he seems to be? I hope so. I'm here to tell you what I think we all hope, except for the dodos on Twitter who got nothing better to do. So they're hoping that Ohtani screws up because, I just hope schadenfreude for everybody to fail. If you're not in that category, you're hoping the best for Ohtani because he's great for the game. It's as important to this game as anyone literally who has ever played it because of what he means overseas, transcending into other sports, into pop culture, and in a time where baseball needs all of that marketing and then some. But there are questions. What questions do you have? I want to hear from you. Let me know. Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts. If you're listening that way, you can hit me up where maybe you've seen this on Twitter or X, if you will, at Casey Sturt, or on YouTube, where you can get onto the bio and get onto the Unfiltered channel for all the content, and wherever else you might be. I hope you have a blessed night. We are just getting started seemingly with this saga. I only need Keith Morrison doing a voiceover that we could put this thing on NBC, because I'm scratching my head. I can't figure it out. I know this. Unfiltered, as always, is presented by our good friends at BetOnline.